Welcome to the CALPADS batch file submission training. In this training, we will explain the functionality and nuances for the file submission process in CALPADS. We will discuss file processing methods, demonstrate the submission workflow, and resolve rejected records. Objective. As with all of our trainings, we have specific learning objectives. These 4 objectives are designed to promote or develop skills of LEA data coordinators. At the end of this session, LEAs should be able to plan the required steps for batch file submission driving data reporting through project management, demonstrate familiarization with relationships in the data ecosystem by completing the data workflow, uploading a file as part of data curation, resolve submission errors, systematically using available resource documents and analytical mindfulness exemplifying critical thinking. And lastly, complete an iterative sequence of file submissions extracting imperfect data, finding solutions for discrepancies, thereby curating data for CALPADS reporting. The skills I just mentioned, project management, data curation, and critical thinking, are among the skills we have identified in the most successful CALPADS data coordinators. Mastery of these skills will increase your LEA's local capacity and build resiliency to change brought on by system demands and reporting requirements. Let's walk through today's agenda. We will begin with an overview of the file submission process. Then we will demonstrate this process in our test environment. Also in our test environment, we will review the methodology for resolving rejected records as a result of failed input validations. And then lastly, we will conclude today's training with a recap of information and key points. Overview. Let's discuss some general information about the file submission process. One of the key concepts that we'd like to impart upon you today are the ways to submit data into CALPADS. And there's 3 different methods. There's online maintenance, batch file submissions, and API transfer. Online maintenance requires that the user log into CALPADS and edit data manually, 1 record at a time. Batch file, the most common and used method, requires the user to log into the CALPADS portal and submit files. Files can be submitted 1 at a time or multiple files at once. Batch file functionality allows the user to submit records for 1 or more records in a single transaction. API data transfer is a direct interface between CALPADS and a CEDS, or a special education data system. Similar to batch file, API transfers allows data to go back and forth from a special education data system to CALPADS for multiple records or a single record. A distinction, or the big difference between batch file and API data transfer, is that through API data transfer, a user is only interacting directly with their special education data system. One thing to consider is, while batch file submissions are the most efficient way to manage large number of records from one student information system to CALPADS, understanding how to make updates manually is a very important skill, and you should spend the time to learn the navigation and the location of each record and where you can go to edit records as well as submit batch files. Another key concept to consider, or one that we'd like to share, is that regardless of method, data input into CALPADS is processed with the same input validations and data discrepancies. Data submission cycle. Here we have a diagram of how data gets from your local student information system into CALPADS. So all student data begins at the local level, whether it's a local SIS, Student Information System, or CEDS, Special Education Data System. From your local system, you're going to submit or extract a batch file and submit that file into CALPADS. Once it's in CALPADS, it's subject to input validation errors. If any records in a file triggers an input validation error, the entire file will be rejected. If all the records pass, the data within that file will be automatically posted to CALPADS. Posted data in the CALPADS ODS is used for accountability, state data matches, state testing, and they also generate data discrepancies. So while your file may pass all input validation errors and records will be posted to CALPADS, there's still a second set of validations, which we call data discrepancies, which checks your data for completeness and accuracy. Any applicable records from files that have been posted to CALPADS will be included in a snapshot, whether that's a Fall 1 snapshot, Fall 2 snapshot, or one of the 4 end-of-year snapshots. Only applicable records posted in the CALPADS ODS are included in the snapshot. In other trainings, we talk about a third set of validation errors called certification errors, and those will be ran on applicable records. Those applicable records in the snapshot are used to generate reports, .csv files, those that are comma separated or caret separated, and text files can be used to submit data to CALPADS. In addition to those file types, CALPADS will also accept data that's correctly formatted in an Excel spreadsheet. If you were to Google the CALPADS user manual and from the home screen navigate to Resource, Batch File Templates, you can see Excel spreadsheets in the right format for CALPADS file submission. There is a batch file template for every record type in CALPADS. File processing methods. Since the post-process redevelopment, there appears to be 2 transaction processing methods in CALPADS. Transaction processing is the most restrictive processing method. In transaction processing, the operational key fields cannot be changed or replaced for existing records. To replace or change data in an operational key field, 2 separate transactions must be made. First, the existing record must be deleted, and then in a second submission or a second transaction, a new record with corrected data should be submitted to replace the deleted record. Replacement processing is more liberal, and while it is easier to replace or edit records with replacement processing, you must understand that all the records in CALPADS with the same operational key are replaced or deleted with each submission. So to paint a picture, if you want to replace a single record for a file type that uses replacement processing, and you have 1,000 records with that same operational key, that single record that you submit in a file will be posted. But if the remaining 1,000 records are not included in that file and posted again, they will be replaced. Every record sharing an operational key is replaced upon submission. Typically, the record types that use replacement processing, LEA submit data in complete data sets. So let's review the processing methods by record type. So again, transaction processing is related to the SENR or SSID enrollment record type, the student information, which is used to populate student demographic information, the student program, the SPRG, the student English language acquisition, the SELA, the SELA, the SELA, the special education program or the SPED record type, and the staff demographic, the SDEM. Placement transaction method affects the staff assignment, the course section, the student course section, the student career technical education, the work-based learning record types. Replacement processing is also used to post data for the student absence summary, the student incident, the student results, the student offenses, the student services, or the post-secondary status record types. On the left, those files that are processed using transaction processing method, you can see that they are the student data. This is the data types. These are the record types that are generally updated on an ongoing basis throughout the year. When you look to the right, you see the replacement processing method files. These records are generally submitted to satisfy a specific submission. So the student career technical education file is typically submitted during end of year 1. Likewise, the student absence summary or the STAS file is submitted during end of year 3. Ownership. Ownership is a key concept in CALPADS. Ownership is generally gained through the student's enrollment record. The academic year, the start and the end dates in the student enrollment record determine the period of ownership for a student's record in your LEA. So if a student begins school, their enrollment record shows a school start date of 9/1/2022. Should you try to submit a student information or a student program record on 7/1/2022, you may trigger an ownership error because, again, ownership starts on a student's enrollment and end date. You own those records for an SSID so long as they are enrolled within your LEA. Preparing for a batch file submission. So it's important to know the roles required for a batch file submission. The edit roles. In the CALPADS administration module, there are view and edit roles for record types. The edit role allows you to submit batch files for students, while the view role allows you to navigate the CALPADS user interface. You need the edit role to submit batch files. In the CALPADS user manual, you can go to Functionality Map, Admin, User Management. Scrolling down in the submenu, you can see user roles. Each role and a description of the provided functionality is listed in this table. So let's review the steps for a batch file submission. Step 1, you're going to prepare the data. That's populating the records in your student information system or your special education data system. Prior to submitting data to CALPADS, you have to make sure that the data is accurate in your local systems. Step 2, you need to extract the files from your local systems and upload those files to CALPADS. Step 3, once those files have been uploaded to CALPADS or submitted, you can navigate to the View Submission Status screen to review the results of your file submission. If there are no rejected records, the file will automatically post those records. This will be considered a passed file or a passed submission. If there are rejected records or failed records that lead to a rejected submission or a rejected file, you would move on to step 4, which requires you to correct those rejected records in your local SIS or your local SEDS system. Once you make those corrections in your local system, you start the process over again. So step 5 is to upload a new file to correct rejected records. We've corrected the rejected records in our local system, and we're submitting our second attempt at a CALPADS file submission. Step 6 would be to repeat this process over and over again until all the records from a file pass and then the file is posted. So you can see this may be an iterative process. You may submit multiple files or multiple attempts at a single file. The idea is to submit a file with as little errors as possible. None if you can manage that. However, when you have a file that has failed records, you go back to your student information system, you update the data so that it will be accepted to CALPADS. You resubmit that file, you extract a new file with the clean data, you submit that file to CALPADS. Hopefully you go down from, let's say, 40 errors to 20, and you slowly whittle down each error until you can have a file submitted with 0 errors. Again, once you have a file with 0 rejected records, it will automatically post to CALPADS. So now that you know the data submission cycle and understand the concept of ownership in CALPADS and are familiar with the steps required for a batch file submission, you're ready to review the next module where we will demonstrate the file submission process.